I'm not Dean Takahashi, but I am from the Russian Federation and I have to kill you.
I'll do whatever you say.
You'll understand in a moment. This is a pretty sweaty suit that Dean had on. Woo! No, I don't mean he stinks, but it's warm. Okay, hi, I'm Perrin, this is Jessica. Super excited to have an opportunity to interview Jessica. She has quite a story to tell, one that I think is unique and different than probably anything else at the show. And she's been in business for 15 years, she and her husband Kenny, and in our industry that's not short and it's not super long, but it's definitely healthy.
Feels super long.
Feels super long. It's dog years. And despite changing mobile markets and massive political unrest, they have figured out exactly what their company needs to be doing, realizing that's a day-by-day thing. But, and she is married to her husband, Kenny. They have run the company since the beginning, and in this last 6 months, you swapped roles. Mm-hmm. You are now CEO and he's president.
Yep.
And maybe you can explain a little bit about why. Actually, why?
Why? You know, Kenny is an amazing, amazing man. He's really evolved, I think. And 2 years ago, he said to me, you know what? We've been running this company together since the beginning, but just purely by nature of the title, I get many, many more opportunities than you will ever get. And so I think that it's time that you got those opportunities, number one. And number two, we work in an industry where there are just not enough women leaders who are at the forefront. So let's make this happen. And it took us 2 years, but you know, everything, which we'll talk about in a little bit, everything in the last year kind of got turned upside down. So the timing was finally right.
So, and then this all relates to why I came out and why I'm the Russian Federation and why I have to kill you. But, so as a linear mobile game, your brilliance really was in creating different paths. And I want you to just touch really lightly on what your business has been. You've done mobile games, and now the greater emphasis is on these back-end systems.
Yeah, so we've been, I mean, as you said, we've been in business for 15 years. That means like when we started, we were in skill gaming, then we did virtual worlds. I mean, everything that has kind of been an evolution in this business, we have been a part of in one way or another. And the last 5 years especially, we've been focusing really on social and mobile. But the backbone of our business has always been our network on the web. So kind of when you start a business, and we bootstrapped our business, so when you start a business and you don't have a lot of money, you figure out creative ways to kind of make things happen. And one of the things that we did early on was we distributed our games on the web, you know, not on our own site because we couldn't afford to acquire users, but on other people's sites. Kind of as a result, we've created over the last decade this very, very large network of online games across every major digital publisher in the United States. So if you go to CNN or USA Today or the Washington Post or the LA Times, you go to their game sections, they're powered by us. So really, and again, we'll get into this, but kind of as everything kind of imploded for us in the last year, one of the things we did was take a step back from what we were doing on mobile and social more aggressively, because it's a really tough business to survive in. And we've spent the last 6 months really focusing on our core business, which is our network on the web. And we're very excited about how that's shaping up. And we'll be releasing a new product in the next couple months that we think is really going to kind of change how people engage on the web and on the mobile web. So we're very excited about it.
So a majority of your company was in Crimea.
Yes.
And so a little bit like a video game, but actually real life. In 2014, under Putin's orders, the Ukrainian territory was seized by the Russian Federation. They wanted it back into Russia. And there were masked troops that came in, tanks rolling down the street. They even had closed the airport.
Yep.
And it was over the holiday season. There was a presidential sanction here in the US. Tell us what happened and what, it literally blew up your company, it blew up your lives. Like what happened? You were sitting at dinner with your husband and?
So, you know, it starts, I guess, probably in February of 2014 when people started gathering in the square in Kiev, and then eventually, you know, the president was deposed and the government was overthrown. And we were all we were watching from afar. Now granted, I mean, I said that, we started this business 2001. We started our development studio in Simferopol in Crimea in 2004. We started with 6 people and we grew it to 100 over the years. So this has been a real, I mean, it's our life. It's our life's work. It's our labor of love. We own an apartment there. We raised our children there in the summers. These are deep personal relationships that we've had with everybody in this studio for over a decade. So we're watching from afar, kind of aghast at what's going on in Kiev, thinking, well, that's Kiev. It's far away. It's not really going to affect us, hopefully. Maybe we'll have to slow down travel. Fast forward like a month later, and literally this city that nobody had ever heard of, except for us, is on the front page of the New York Times. It was like, it was the most bizarre thing.
The video game come to life.
Right. I mean, so all of a sudden, Simferopol, Crimea, on the cover of the New York Times, tanks rolling through the street, and I have 100 of our colleagues, of our friends, of our coworkers, they're like family to us, there. We're thinking, oh my God, and at this point, nobody knew, are these Russians, are they not Russians? They were just these indiscriminate people who happened to have tanks,
And covered faces.
Yeah, and so it was frightening. It was frightening for us. I think they kept very calm about the whole thing. And at that point, we started making contingency plans, which is really, I mean, it's surreal. You don't plan for this. Nobody teaches you how to deal with a situation like this.
We're in video gaming.
Right, so, it's like, what do we do if the office gets raided by these masked people with guns? What do we do if one of our employees is shot? What do we do if it's no longer safe to get to the office? How can we keep the company going with people working from home? And one of those contingency plans was just picking up and moving. Where would we move to? How would we do it? I can't even get into the crazy logistics of what it means to have the country that your company is based in turn into another country. I mean, we had to re-register everyone. We had to re-register everything. We changed currencies. Like it was complete insanity. And then it was, topped off by December 19th, President Obama sanctioned the region, which essentially meant that it became instantly illegal for us to do business there. So our company of 100 people evaporated overnight, instantly.
You were having dinner with Kenny. You said that you went outside and you just thought you were going to throw up.
Yeah, we were having dinner, and Kenny is an optimist, as I am. I think you have to be as an entrepreneur to survive. But he was like, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. We haven't read the full thing. It's not going to affect us. And I remember thinking, I can't sit here. I'm going to be sick, like I'm going to faint, I don't know. But like I could, in that moment, I could feel the gravity of what was really taking place. And it was literally like 15 years of work. And outside of the work, just the relationships and the people and what they were dealing with.
Because you couldn't talk to them, you couldn't pay them.
No, couldn't pay them, couldn't get code in or out.
And then the work stopped, obviously.
Yeah, unless we wanted to run the risk of going to prison for 25 years and a $250,000 fine, yeah.
So then what happened after that?
So there was a lot of crying. There was a lot of, what the hell are we going to do? And then I think that, and again, this is taking place all over the holidays, so everything is closed. The American government's closed, the Russian government is closed, nobody's working. So I think,
nobody cares.
Literally nobody cared. Like I couldn't find articles about it. I was like, my world is imploding. This is affecting the lives of hundreds of thousands of people.
And your entire business.
And I know nothing, like I can't find out any information about it. Surreal. So I think, after some time, we just said, well, what are we gonna do? And I think that was when we really realized, well, it's not what are we going to do? It's what do they want? And so we started talking to our employees there, and what we found out is that about half wanted to stay and figure it out because they couldn't leave their families and they didn't want to, and half wanted to go. And so the half that wanted to go, we said, where do you want to go?
In Russia.
They said, well, we're willing to go here. And we said, okay, then that's where we're going. And we literally, we took 55 people and their families, and over a 2-week span, we moved them to
a huge thing for a smallish
country.
company.
And yeah, now they're there.
And
doing great.
And how's it all going? Are there 2 separate offices?
No, so I mean, it literally is illegal for an American company to do business in Crimea. So we just have a studio in southern Russia now, near Sochi, and it's growing again. And I've been there 4 times this year, and that's the bright side of the story. It's amazing. I mean, it is kind of like, you know, we see this refugee crisis around the world that's going on, and it is. I don't want to say it's the same, because it's absolutely not, but it is kind of a microcosm of what's going on. These are people who literally, I mean, they could have stayed, but then they would have been, to a certain extent, you know, economic refugees. There's just not a lot of business to be done there anymore. There's not a lot of work, and people are suffering. So, but it is amazing to watch people have the resilience to pick up and move their lives and be away from their children and be away from their wives or their husbands, and then and somehow come out the other side.
So didn't you literally have this sort of come to heart conversation with your partner? We could just wrap up this deal and look to hire some studio people here in the US if this doesn't completely tank our finances. I mean, you guys have you have like supported yourself financially forever with one round of funding recently. Mm-hmm. I mean, some other folks would have just tied a nice bow on it, walked away, and started anew. Did you think about that?
You know, we never did. It never crossed our minds that there was an option that could potentially leave people behind. We were going to do whatever it took, even if it cost way too much money, I think, to make sure that people were safe, because they give us their creativity and their blood, sweat, and tears and their passion every single day. And I couldn't stomach not doing everything I could to give back to them.
Did it keep you up at night a lot, thinking about it?
Oh, when it was going on, it was, I mean, it was,
Did you lose a few pounds?
There was drinking.
Lost a few pounds.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't pretty. It wasn't a happy Christmas in the household.
Yeah, to say the least. Well, out of that, you said that you recognize some new things that I think apply to most people's business, and that is, you take Twisty Hollow, your popular game, for example, and you're so emotionally invested in it, and it did really well, and then it kind of
it didn't do really well.
It got really good reviews and all that, but then it leveled and didn't do well. And you had to decide whether you were too emotionally attached to keep sinking cash in hopes there would be a rise, or whether it's time to just move on. Yeah,
I mean, I like to think sometimes, you know, Rovio tells the story about how Angry Birds was their 51st game. I like to think we got to like number 47, maybe number 48. We never got to that 51st. I think if we had the ability to have kept going, we probably would have gotten there. But you know, everybody in the audience knows it's a mobile free-to-play is a really, really, really hard business. And I think a lot of people do a fantastic job, and they have figured it out, and a lot of people get lucky. And we never entirely figured it out, and we never got lucky enough. But yeah, we had some great games.
So you created your new path.
Yeah, they were well reviewed, but they weren't going to keep the lights on. Mm-hmm. You know, when you have 100, 150 employees, that's a big nut every single month.
But you struggled because of the emotional attachment to some of the products.
Yeah, there's like I think that when you really believe in something, and when it is an artistic endeavor, definitely there is that little bit of addiction. And I think that's also like what happens when you're an entrepreneur. You have to have this ridiculously, you know, unfounded optimism that the next one is going to be the one. The next one is going to be the one. Because if you don't think that way, you just go away, right?
Right.
We couldn't have survived for 15 years without that attitude. But definitely, I think that when you watch your entire business literally evaporate overnight, you know,
you gotta get
over
creative.
No fault of your own, and you look what was 150 people in the face to now 60 or 75, you say, we just can't continue to do things the way that we were doing things because the world has changed. Literally, the world has changed around us. And we can't keep going the way we were going. We've got to make some choices.
So what, and the, kind of get closer to our wrapping this up, if there are any lessons for you two as partners to survive a business in this kind of situation, and the lessons that maybe your kids have received out of this is an unusual household to grow up in, what might those be?
Lessons. I mean, I think we talked about this a little bit earlier, but I think that, it's important that Kenny and I are still the majority shareholders of our business. And I think if we hadn't necessarily been, if we had that pressure for an exit, the business would not still be around. It wouldn't have been around for 15 years. We wouldn't have, picked ourselves up and dusted ourselves off when something didn't work and tried something new.
Yeah.
We would have, like Thelma and Louise did over the cliff at some point.
Yeah.
So I think part of it has to do with that. And the choices we made definitely have to do with that. I think that it's such a cliche, but the kind of what doesn't kill you makes you stronger thing. We're a different business than we were a year ago. In many ways, we're a better business than we were a year ago because of having kind of walked through this fire and kept on walking. And definitely, it exposed some truths that we may not have seen otherwise. It exposed some things that maybe we were holding on to too tightly that we couldn't hold on to anymore.
It didn't make sense.
It didn't make sense. When you're stripped down when everything goes away, when you're stripped down to your barest, you kind of, and you figure it out.
It's a journey of survival.
It's very revealing in many ways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You learned a lot about world politics that you did not know before, correct?
I think I learned more about people than I did about world politics. And that when all of this was happening, and it's been so contentious, with Americans and Russians recently, more than I can remember since when I was young, in like the mid-'80s, it never came up. It never came up inside the company. We were always just trying to figure out a way that we could support each other. It was never, why did your president do this? Why did your president do that? Politics never became part of the conversation. And thank God it didn't become part of the conversation. We just kind of figured out what was right for the company and how could we best support each other. Because we knew it was extraordinary times that we were living.
Did any of your employees have military knocking on their doors?
Yes. Yeah.
What stories did you hear?
Scary ones. About people coming and asking for identifications, and it was
tanks rolling in.
Yeah, tanks rolling by, soldiers in the street. Not the kind of thing that we can ever really envision living here.
We hope not.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very cool. And so sometimes it's about the journey, not necessarily winning.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think that
you want to win, but that's not the only goal.
Of course, winning is incredibly important, and I'm hugely competitive. If I could have the #1 game on the App Store right now, if there was a way to do it, I would do it, right? But I think that the philosophy behind how we run our business is that the journey is much more important than the destination. Because I have to love waking up and doing what I do every day, and I do.
And who you do it with.
Yeah, and if it was based on anything other than that, I would just be miserable. I'm not willing to sacrifice my life to be miserable for some unattainable, potentially, or maybe hollow end destination.
Yeah. And on that note, thanks for letting me chat with you.
Thank you.
Ah!